ambulance.
We have just shot somebody.
Oh.
Unconscious, not breathing. No pulse.
This is the third time that someone has died at the hands of police in the last 6 months in the midst of a mental health crisis.
Michael needed help. He needed medical care. He didn't need 2 bullets through his chest.
It was clear that my son was shot in the head when he was on his hands and knees.
It's deja vu all over again to see these juries make recommendations about de-escalation, and then we see videotapes where there's no de-escalation.
And why, after the first 3 shots, when you can see a team falling to the ground, did Forcillo keep shooting?
It's really quite astonishing. It has to change.
18-year-old Sammy Yatim's death on a Toronto streetcar in the summer of 2013 ignited public outrage over police shootings of the mentally ill or emotionally disturbed.
Your answer is call for help with 9 bullets!
Yatim was a student from a middle-class family. He had no criminal record, no history of violence.
Our youth are our future. We have a right to live in safety and security.
According to his family, Sammy Yatim wasn't mentally ill. But as he rode the Dundas line late that July night, Yatim was acting very strange, even threatening fellow passengers with a knife. For many people, that still wasn't enough to justify what happened next. Yatim was alone on the streetcar when police arrived. They fired 9 times. And then they tasered him. Canada keeps no reliable nationwide record of police shootings, but an extremely conservative analysis of inquest records from 2004 to 2014 reveals 72 people in crisis shot by police, almost 40% of all police shootings. From time to time, the focus shifts onto the disproportionate number of non-white victims, but always at the core, what seems to be excessive use of force against people in crisis.
Until the system starts to hold the officers who do these things responsible, it's going to keep happening again and again.
Little about Brian. He was the life of the party. He had a smile that would light up any room, would make the girls' hearts melt. He was a very good-looking boy.
Jackie Christopher's son O'Brien was on a break from second-year chemical engineering at Ryerson University in Toronto when he began suffering paranoid delusions.
At one point, we were talking, and he said to me, I was watching TV, and they know my name. They know everything about me, you know, and I think it's when I went to the dentist and they put something in one of my tooth, and it's like a microphone, so I need to go get it out and stuff like that. And then I knew it was something was totally off.
By 2004, O'Brien has been in and out of hospital, but is still managing somehow to hold down a job. One June day, he heads into Edwards Gardens. For some reason, he's carrying a knife.
It looked odd and potentially dangerous. Police came, it was appropriate. They don't see a knife at that point. This is all according to their own evidence. But one of the officers yells at him, "Get down on the ground." He says, "What for?" Very sensible question. The officer doesn't answer him. The 2 officers try and wrestle him to the ground. He breaks away.
You shout at somebody who's already in a crisis, it's worse. He runs, you run after him. Okay. I says, do you think maybe he ran because of the way you spoke to him initially?
But why didn't they answer his question, what for? He wasn't even agitated at that point, according to their own description. So I asked the officer that in cross-examination, and he says, first we get control, then I answer questions.
And they shot him. within 3 minutes of coming into contact with him, if that much.
After the 2007 inquest into her son's death, a courier dropped off a package for Jackie Christopher. Undoubtedly, it contains the clothes O'Brien was wearing that day. She can't throw it out or bear to open it. Peter Rosenthal became a familiar figure, acting for bereaved families as inquest followed inquest into police shootings of the emotionally disturbed.
My hope is that this inquest really underlines the fact that police officers should try de-escalation in all these situations way before they use weapons.
In February 2012, a mentally ill man walks away from Toronto East General Hospital.
From the evidence at the inquest, Michael Ellegon left the hospital wearing just a hospital gown, socks, and underwear, and a toque, I think. It must have been cold.
Ellegon wanders into a convenience store, grabs 2 pairs of scissors, and gets into a tussle with the owner over payment, resulting in a cut to the man's hand.
Hi, it's Kathy Radio. Kilometer 54 for a stabbing.
As police respond to numerous 911 calls, Ellegon walks on, trying to get into cars and houses. For the most part, eyewitnesses say he isn't aggressive, but strangely out of it.
Was he waving the scissors around?
Slightly.
Like menacingly or like confused?
Confused.
It was just tunnel vision, straight ahead, walking towards a line of police officers. He wasn't running at them or going to attack them. He just didn't stop.
Right now. Imagine being Michael Ellegon, shuffling along and whatever confused thoughts he had, and all of a sudden he's dead.
Toronto ambulance, where do you need us?
Hi, it's Radio Room.
Hi.
Can you meet us at 546 Milverton? We've just shot somebody.
Oh, okay.
We've numerous units on scene. Is he conscious and breathing, do we know? Is the male conscious and breathing? Unconscious, not breathing. No pulse.
BSA. Okay.
BSA, okay?
This is the 3rd time that someone has died at the hands of police in the last 6 months in the midst of a mental health crisis.
You know, I look back at all the inquests that happened before O'Brien's death, O'Brien's inquest that I spent many days in, and all the recommendations that came out of that inquest. And again, nothing was done.
From the police perspective, lots is being done. In 2014, Toronto police handled 20,000 interactions with people in crisis, when possible, sending a special team that includes a nurse.
Hi there.
What's bothered you today?
It's my son! I fed him! Breastfeed!
Okay, so what do you think the police can do to help you today?
You have the force officer!
How can you throw your medication outside? Well, it was a good call in the fact that the police officers backed off because she was so agitated and she's very delusional. So it was all just about de-escalating her and getting her to the hospital the easiest way.
Toronto the Good is not always so good to the mentally ill, especially if they're sick and homeless, whichever came first.
We're in an economic crisis. People are losing jobs, they're losing housing, they can end up on the street. And once you're on the street, you're quite likely to end up in some kind of mental, emotional crisis.
Toronto isn't the only city where community mental health services aren't keeping up with increasing demand.
So this year we're on track for 10,500 visits to our emergency for mental health and addiction problems. I call it the $2,500 office visit because it's $800 for the police and the ambulance each, and then about $900 for a short stay and emerge. And that's a lot of wasted health resources. We should try and treat them before the crisis.
That is only a toy.
I know, but you can't be walking around with that, right? You're gonna generate calls for us.
Vancouver police estimate 30% of their calls involve mental health issues.
I could talk to you for an hour about what happens to people. I used to work at that hospital in the operating room, and here I am, St. Paul's, as a registered nurse. And here I am on the gutter.
How'd you get here?
Bipolar condition. It comes, creeps up behind you, and you know it's coming. It's like a bear. It grabs you in a bear hug, and there's nothing you can do.
Police are kept hopping with chronic and growing inner-city problems. But those problems have little to do with what happened to Paul Boyd. August 13th, 2007, Boyd was struggling with bipolar disorder when he was fatally shot by Vancouver police. Except for his illness, 39-year-old Boyd wasn't a member of any at-risk community.
Paul was born in Southern California. I was there teaching at Caltech for 4 years, and he was a really bright little kid from the very beginning, just full of life and joy, and also very intelligent.
His mental illness first showed up during university.
Mostly delusions of persecution, of people watching, and, well, even secret agent kind of things.
Still, Paul made his way into an animation program and out into a very successful career.
Hey, Chess.
His last job was at Vancouver's Global Mechanic.
Paul's caring personality showed up in his animation in that he'd take time to do things well, like the rabbit that he animated at the Quinty Hotel, a film that we worked on together. It was frustrating how long it took him to do it, but I also loved that he cared that much about it. That's definitely one of my favorite pieces of motion that he did and drawing that he did, because whenever I look at that part of the film, that rabbit running is Paul.
How he would turn a problem over on its head was always just really, really incredible to watch. I remember just thinking, wow, okay, yeah, that completely solves our problem, and I just didn't think that would come out of him because he was so quiet and shy. And he was often strangely like a little kid when he was happy and also when he was scared.
Early in 2007, Paul's mother was diagnosed with ALS. He was devastated.
His cycles started to get closer together, and he was having a harder and harder time. I think he wasn't sleeping as well.
By August 13th, Paul is in serious trouble.
The day that it happened, he called us to meet with him.
He wasn't Paul, and there was kind of the light was out or something. I don't know. I hadn't seen him like that before anyway. I hadn't seen him that far gone.
From his West Side Vancouver apartment, Paul calls his dad 3 times that day, the last call at around 7:30 p.m.
He now sounded much more psychotic than he had earlier on in the day. He didn't want to go to the hospital. He said it was just like being in jail there, and he didn't want to start from square zero.
It's the last time they'll speak.
Police say a man wielding a chain with a padlock struck 2 officers, and within seconds he was dead, shot several times.
Police will report being called to an assault in progress. 2.5 minutes after they arrive on scene, Paul Boyd is dead. One officer later testifies that he fired 9 times in self-defense as Boyd attacked him with a chain.
Our officers are trained quite well, and they took what option they had to take.
His story was so at odds with the witnesses. They had no axe to grind. It was clear that my son was shot in the head when he was on his hands and knees.
The inquest was over and police cleared when, out of the blue, a video surfaced, taken by a tourist visiting Vancouver. What it reveals is shocking. Boyd was unarmed and crawling before the fatal shot was fired. A special prosecutor concluded that the officer who fired on Boyd believed he was under threat. But there was no assault in progress when police were called. Paul wasn't initially hostile to police, and he was unarmed by the time the 9th and final shot was fired.
I didn't see much assessment of the situation. They just were in it and suddenly reacting to it, and then Paul was reacting to their reaction, and it just went downhill from there. The police were the cause of the violence that night.
Eight years later, St. Paul's Emergency is bursting with mental health patients, thanks in large part to positive, if expensive, changes in policing. Fewer people in crisis jailed, more taken to hospital.
And so that kind of understanding, it really is landmark, because it's far easier for somebody to be arrested, taken to jail, booked in, and then the policeman get back on his shift. It's a more difficult, complicated process to do what they're doing now.
These kinds of improvements to policing across the country definitely improve lives, but they don't always stop the gunfire.
What was that?
Whoa!
Yeah, they shot him.
There seems to be a disconnect between progressive police policy around people in crisis and the average cop's inability, sometimes, to hold their fire, even when the person's vulnerability couldn't be more obvious. In response to the increase in interactions with people in crisis, several Canadian police forces now use mobile crisis teams, a mental health professional partnered with a police officer. But nowhere are there enough teams, and they're never authorized as first responders, except in Hamilton.
I think what makes us so unique is the fact that we are a 911 responder. So when a person's in a mental health crisis and a 911's called, we're able to be there, and to be there generally within minutes.
Late in this evening shift, a call about a young man who may be suicidal and is thinking of hurting his mother.
10-4, thank you.
The mobile team moves carefully based on information from the 911 caller. They even contact the young man's cell phone first.
Hi, my name is Sarah. I work with the Rapid Response Team with Hamilton Police Service. We just got a call from somebody who's a bit concerned about you. We're just a couple of minutes away.
Sarah and police partner Terry have agreed to a meet outside the house. Difficult to imagine this low-key approach from many regular police units.
A lot of tension in the house with my mother. She's very emotionally abusive. I have had thoughts, of taking a baseball bat and hitting her in the back of the head with it, but it's something I always tell myself, is it worth going to prison over? And the answer is always no.
Do you feel you need to go anywhere tonight? Do you feel you need to be out of the house tonight to keep everybody safe?
No.
No, okay.
Sarah is able to get the young man thinking about solutions, including counseling.
But if you need anybody to talk to, give us a call, all right? And if you feel any frustration, give us a call anytime, all right? All right, take care. Bye now. We diverted this young man away from the criminal justice system. We diverted him away from the hospital, and now he's going to be getting some counseling, which is exactly what he needs tonight.
But with budget constraints, not even in Hamilton are you guaranteed to get a special team when you call 911 because of a family member in crisis.
The reality is a lot of these things unfold very quickly. So it's one of the reasons I think I have tended to go more for training, because the reality is it's going to be the uniformed officer who the vast majority of the time is going to be the one dealing with the person in crisis.
An hour's drive northeast of Toronto in Ajax, Ontario, it's nearing the first anniversary of Michael McIsaac's death in a police shooting. His family gathers to remember a husband, brother, and favorite uncle.
He'd be downstairs, just him and the kids, hours. Playing all these silly little kid games.
47-year-old Michael McIsaac suffered from seizures, the result of a childhood brain injury. He's in bed recovering from an episode on Monday morning, December 2nd, 2013.
I just heard Michael come out of the room. I could hear his footsteps, and he walked past me, and when he walked past me, I realized he was completely naked. It was very unlike Michael. Michael was very modest.
Michael bolts out the door into 0-degree weather, pushing past his wife and sister-in-law.
And he was running very, very fast. Something that I'd never seen before in my life. It was basically delirium. I was just in shock. My sister called 911. There was many, many calls to 911. You know, man is naked in the street, he's running naked.
Michael tells one motorist that he's running to his mother's in Mississauga, but that's 70 kilometers away. The man asks if Michael realizes he has no clothes on.
And he said, Michael, he said, your brother was shaking. He said, yeah, thanks, man, I'm kind of cold. I guess I am. And that's when he started to come north.
Not a block from home, Michael begins banging on vehicle windows, perhaps looking for help.
So I immediately knew something was off.
From down the street, a neighbor calls 911 and pulls into her driveway.
He came up the driveway and banged on my window.
Shelley doesn't open the window and backs out of the driveway when Michael picks up a rock from her garden.
He picked it up and dropped it a couple of times, and that, oddly, is a symptom of complex partial seizure, picking things up and dropping them.
Next, Michael picks up a piece of patio furniture and pounds on Shelley's door, apparently trying to get in. He's still holding a piece of it when police arrive.
The officers were out of the car, guns drawn. He was coming towards them. I heard the shot, or shots.
From the time the police officers pulled up, we were told by the SIU that the GPS in the subject officer's car was 10:23:30. Michael was shot by 10:23:42, twice. The video we have of Michael sitting in the street crying and rocking is 10:23:46.
It was 12 seconds. No one wants to see an officer hurt or killed, most definitely. But the morning of December 2nd, that was not the case. Michael needed help. He needed an ambulance, he needed medical care. He didn't need 2 bullets through his chest.
Police officers are so reluctant to back up. I was one, I understand that. But sometimes, back up. Hold the fort if you want till help comes.
Former police chief Terry Coleman is a voice police listen to. His 2014 report on training for interactions with people in crisis was released at the National Chiefs Conference. Coleman would make de-escalation skills a compulsory qualification for all police officers.
You have to complete it every 3 years, and you have to go through a testing procedure. And if you do not pass that and meet the criteria, then that would be like not qualifying with your handgun. You'd have remedial training, you'd have a chance to retest and requalify. Or wouldn't be on the street.
Coleman says killings of police, like in Moncton and Mayerthorpe, may have swung the pendulum away from public safety towards officer safety first. Real fear amplified by aggressive police culture and training imported from south of the border. On the hill above Albuquerque town center, striking proof of the economic crisis driving more and more people towards the edge. Albuquerque is not the first place you'd choose to be homeless or mentally ill. In 2014, the police department was put under Federal Department of Justice supervision after 26 shootings of civilians in 4 years. The most notorious, a homeless, mentally ill man camping above the city.
Do it. Get on the ground!
Captured on police body cam, the shooting would ricochet around the world. The justification for shooting, the man is holding 2 small camping knives.
Still got the knives in his hand? Still got the knives in his hand. Still got his knives in his hands.
Exactly a year later, Illinois-based police training giant CALIBRE Press comes to Albuquerque. They train 20,000 people a year, including several hundred Canadian cops. Owner and chief trainer Jim Glennon is well aware of today's audience.
I was asked by a national news source, said, you know, Albuquerque, they're out of control. And they've shot all these people and nobody's been indicted. Any reason why? I go, yeah, because all the shoots were good. Well, 25 are dead. What does that tell you? 12 of them missed. And I'm not trying to be a smartass about it, but if you're going to start shooting at somebody, your goal is to stop that threat, right?
These sort of independent organizations, particularly out of the United States, that specialize in delivering officer safety, survival schools, weekends, and what have you, I think has heightened the sort of the whole attention to officer safety.
Say what you'd say in real life. Ready, go.
Is your hand? Drop your gun.
Okay, what do you want? Hands, gun, what? What do you want me to do?
Drop the gun.
I'm dropping it. Bang, bang. Okay.
It's dangerously close to being a sort of a fear factor, and very often an irrational fear factor.
Produced before Glennon took over the company, a CALIBRE Press video of a training exercise unintentionally helped spread what became a faulty piece of training doctrine. This was never intended as more than a demonstration of how quickly someone can move in ideal circumstances. But the exercise somehow morphed into the now infamous 21-foot rule. It would come up repeatedly in inquests as one reason an officer had to fire.
A minimum reactionary gap of 21 feet is required to react and deliver at least 2 rounds and to have enough time to move out of the attacker's path.
The 21-foot rule got into officers' heads, particularly problematic when running alongside another piece of common training dogma: lethal force as an officer's only reliable defense against a knife or other edged weapon.
Most of the time, when police are exposed to a sharp-edged weapon, perceived or otherwise, they're going to pull their gun. And there's advancement or not, they will discharge their weapon to prevent being at risk. I'm suggesting, and I'd state that under oath, that that's not valid.
Suddenly Patrick comes at me, and just for purposes of training, it's an angle 1 strike. My hands are on the weapon, like nobody touches me.
Steve Somerville is a Canadian private safety trainer working this day with security staff at Toronto East General Hospital.
I was for 24 years with the Toronto Police Service. I finished off actually as a staff sergeant at the Ontario Police College. You may be shocked to know that we do more here today in sharp-edged weapon defense than the entire curriculum at the current police academy in Ontario. More depth, more detail, more options.
Drop the weapon.
Drop it, drop it. Police officers are generally trained today that a sharp-edged weapon doesn't always have to be a knife, but anything that cut or puncture skin is probably one of the highest level of threats that you can be exposed to. Generally speaking, you're taught that hand-to-hand defensive options are not an option. There is no negotiation, there's no wiggle room. That's the highest level of threat that a police officer can face. It's a firearms situation. We need to change the paradigm, how police are taught, so we can likely start to get some different results.
The point is not to make police choose between their own life and another's, but to back up from the moment of deadly force, to buy more time so the collision never happens. It can be done. Like in this British video of a man wielding a machete.
Do you think that man would have survived in North America?
No. No.
From Rialto, California, the first ever evidence-based study into a technological remedy for excessive use of force. Body cams to record every police interaction with the public.
I happened to be doing some graduate work over at the University of Cambridge at the Institute of Criminology, and that's about the same time that the advent of the first wave of body cameras started to come about. We partnered up to do a year-long randomized control trial to really test the impacts that those body cameras would have on police officers. The results for the experiment were, I think, far better than we actually expected.
¿Cuál es su problema?
We had about an 88% decrease in complaints against police officers and about a 60% reduction in the amount of times that we used force.
Hey, Carlos, what's going on? Why'd you hit the door?
Because my outside crying, screaming.
They're both scared of you. There's a lot of holes. I don't think that knocking or trying to get the door open requires that many holes in the door. What are they saying? They're stating that you're saying that you're God or something?
That's not true. It's diagnosed or not?
Whether it's a mentally ill person or not, I think that the general interaction with an officer and a citizen is going to be a lot better. I think they'll increase their communication skills and be more willing to talk to the individual.
In Rialto, they regularly use body cam video for training purposes. From the UK, an amazing video for edged weapon training. London police engage with a distraught man wielding not scissors or a knife, but a machete, all captured on a smartphone from across the street.
His ability to move is not completely obstructed by either the officers or by the vehicles, but he is more or less surrounded. You can see the man pacing around on the street or moving forwards and backwards, side to side, front and back, each of them trying to continue to verbally de-escalate the situation over a period of time. You could probably say they've contained him without restraining him. And they keep this situation going backwards and forwards for some minutes whilst other officers are bringing what we would call public order shields to the location. And in a coordinated movement, they move towards him so that there's no way he's going to be able to use that weapon or go anywhere else. He's ended up placed on the ground with the use of the shields, the weapon's taken from him, and then he's stood up and handcuffed and detained.
The incident ends with a man taken to hospital.
Do you think that man would have survived in North America?
No. No, he wouldn't have survived. Wouldn't have survived a couple of minutes, probably.
So what's to be learned from that?
Well, it is doable without firing your firearm.
In the UK, only a small group of specialists carry firearms, so police train to handle every situation without lethal force. De-escalation is at the heart of all training.
All right, Paul! Paul, we're the police! We're here to help! Paul! Ready? Come and talk to us, Paul! Hey! Help me! He's there! I need help! Okay, you help me!
During the next several minutes, as the man keeps raging, police remain calm.
Put the hammer down and we can come and help you.
Please help me! Please help me!
Put the hammer down and I'll come and help you. Well done, Paul. I don't need to hurt you, do I? Okay, so move away from the shield for me. I'm just going to keep coming towards you with the shield so that you don't make any sudden movements. We're not going to put your arms out to the side. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to put this up against you just to make sure that you're not going to hurt us. Okay?
Please.
Checkmate, thank you very much. And next.
Reform outside for a debrief.
It was a case for me of trying to gain his eye contact, trying to speak to me rather than the other person that he could see in the room.
If all of us had been shouting at Paul, that would have just made his condition worse because he's already hearing voices in his head. You've got 5 or 6 people shouting, barking commands at him. That could have tipped him over the edge. So the decision we made before we go in, there'll be one person speaking so that Paul can focus on that one person.
Their sights are so set on de-escalation in the UK that firearms aren't even taken to an incident without formal consent from a senior commander.
Because once you've deployed the weapon, actually, are you
creating a situation where, someone being shot is what's going to happen.
Away from the adrenaline rush of the action, the command log demands pages of thoughtful assessment before firearms are authorized.
By simply having a process where you are authorizing things, it gives time, it gives space to try and de-escalate the situation.
Imagine if the streetcar Sami Yatim was riding had been traveling down a British street.
Tasered as well. In that scenario, a knife, we probably may not even deploy firearms to that, and we would give that person space. I think we would only intervene with a firearm if that person was actually then threatening another person, actually was holding them hostage and was going to harm them. And even then, we would, as the sort of expression goes, we would play it long.
Not to say interactions between police and the mentally ill are perfect in the UK. Their big issue in 2015, still too many ill people taken into custody instead of to treatment. Radical attempts to solve that problem could help armed officers everywhere hold their fire. In Leicester, they partner a cop with a mental health professional, marrying the two information systems.
Female on the line saying she's suicidal, doesn't know what to do. Apparently she's got a CPN and she's with the crisis team, but she's not engaging.
Got a date of birth for her? Yep, she's open to services. Didn't attend her last appointment on the 25th of February.
She states that she's been having thoughts of taking all her medication or slitting her throat. She states without her partner she would be dead.
Okay, there is an ongoing increased high risk of her taking overdose of her prescribed medication as her way of self-harming.
Okay, high risk.
Because they only leave the office for key calls, Leicester Triage can manage 40 incidents a day.
When boyfriends come to find her, she's jumping in and out of traffic, threatening to jump in front of cars.
You come in and grab a pew, which is so much better in here. So what's happened today?
Stop taking my tablets. I have mad mood swings and my partner can't cope with it. So he was on about leaving and then I threatened to kill myself.
At that point in time, was it that you wanted to actually die and never wake up?
No, I just wanted to get out, just stop everything.
To stop.
Yeah, just.
Yeah. Do you know what your tablets are for?
Yeah, it's to keep me calm and to keep me straight. I didn't want to be on tablets for the rest of my life, basically. So I tried to fight it, and it just made myself worse. I know what I've done, and I know that I need to take my tablets, and I know that it's not right, and this is what happened. Thank you so much.
It's all right, not a problem.
Go home.
Yeah. Let me come and speak to Grandma and boyfriend. Not a problem.
Let's get in the warm.
Yes, you can get in the warm now. Okay.
A simple but strong formula. The power of information coupled with a fixed focus on de-escalation.
And when do you guys graduate?
Next week.
Next week.
Next week. Hopefully.
Game's on.
But first, Canadian police have to solve major problems with recruiting. Fundamentally changing police interactions with people in crisis starts with recruiting. Public safety expert Terry Coleman says police are too often in a rush to fill positions.
I'm not satisfied that police agencies routinely hire the right people. I don't think Sometimes they're paying enough attention to some cautions that are put up by, for example, psychological screening or even polygraph, integrity screening. And they, quote unquote, take a chance.
After Sami Yatim's death, an independent review recommended major changes to recruiting, including preference for higher education and experience in mental health. As of autumn 2015, a work in progress.
Game's on.
In some Canadian cities, use of force training is being overhauled, integrating de-escalation.
Get out of my area!
Ma'am, is that a knife in your hands?
Working towards a different trained instinct on the street.
We want to have a conversation with you, but we can't do that with a knife in your hands. Can you drop the knife for us so we can talk?
You got to do what you got to do to help people at the moment or in crisis. Stay grounded, and don't let emotion take over. Don't let fear take over.
And remember that the person in crisis could be someone you love.
They should have just spoke with him. Take the time. There was no rush that morning.
You really don't realize the impact until it happens to you. And you definitely don't want to see another family go through what we did. It's horror. It's absolute horror. And it changes you forever.
And I kept going over my notes, and people kept telling me to not go over my notes.
Jackie Christopher's younger son still dreams about his big brother O'Brien.
I saw him there, and I was surprised to see him. He looked all dapper and stuff. And then, like I said, I'm so glad that you're here, And then I was like, in my dream, I felt like I was about to cry or something. And I was trying to hold it in, and not cry.
I think you've chosen a wonderful profession. Paul was always extremely happy when he was working on animation.
3 times a year at the Vancouver Film School's classical animation grad, David Boyd presents an award in his son's honor. It's a way of reminding people that Paul was much more than what police saw. If only they had managed to hold their fire to find out.
He was one of the best animators in the city and had a career and was admired by everyone and was this really wonderful guy to work with. Paul was portrayed as being some kind of brute instead of actually realizing that there was a person there, a really valuable person.